victimize people out there. So as you're receiving these stimulus checks in the mail, please make sure that you're watching for delivery schedules, making sure that you're looking out for your neighbors, that you don't see anyone going in their mailbox and taking these checks. I'm afraid that we'll see an increase in that. So just be mindful. If you see something, say something. And again, make sure that you're watching out for any elderly neighbors that you may have, any shut-ins that you know about, not just in this case, and make sure that their overall health and welfare are looked after. So thank you for listening today, and I'll entertain any questions that anyone has. Amanda?
Hey, officer, hey, chief. Last week or a few weeks ago, we talked a little bit about officers responding to all 911 calls in person. I just want to double check that when you say that you've refined your tactics on calls for service, is that specifically about PPE or also about calls that officers are responding to?
Yeah, generally speaking about PPE, but as a reminder, before any of this made news, we directed citizens to be able to go to our online reporting services and our non-emergency police service line to be able to report crimes. And there's a category of those that people can report and do online right now. We directed folks towards that. More specifically, when I'm talking about refining tactics, that means calls that are medical type calls, calls related.
Welcome to the May 1st, 2020 meeting of the Mecklenburg Board of Commissioners. The purpose of this meeting is to receive as information the county manager's recommended budget for FY 2021. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 stay in place state and local state of the emergency declarations, the board is again meeting remotely. The public may join and follow the meeting by viewing on the web at mecnc.gov, or you may follow us on Twitter. You may also call in and listen to the meeting at 408-418-9388. Again, 408-418-9388, and entering the following access code: 712-338-126. Again, the access code 712-338-126. Now, since we are meeting remotely, we will begin by each board member identifying him or herself so that the records can reflect who is present and participating in the meeting. I will introduce myself and then call upon each of my colleagues to do the same as I call out their respective district. This process allows the public to know who is present and participating, and also provides an accurate record for the clerk and the board minutes. I am George Dunlap. I am participating remotely. I represent the people of District 3, and I also have the privilege of serving as chair of the board. Next, my at-large colleagues, Pat Cotham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Pat Cotham, County Commissioner at Large.
Ella Scarborough.
Ella Scarborough, County Commissioner at Large.
Trevor Fuller.
Good morning. This is Commissioner Trevor Fuller. I am a County Commissioner at Large and participating in this meeting remotely.
Commissioner for District 1.
Good morning. My name is Elaine Powell. I represent North Mecklenburg, which includes Huntersville, Davidson, and Cornelius, and I also serve as Vice Chair.
Commissioner District 2.
This is Commissioner Vilma D. Leak, representing the most powerful district in this county, and that is District 2, present and county.
District 4.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Terrell, and I represent District 4.
District 5.
Good morning. My name is County Commissioner Susan Harden, and I represent District 5, and I am participating remotely.
And District 6.
Good morning. This is Susan Rodriguez McDowell, Commissioner for District 6, participating remotely.
For the record, all commissioners are present for this meeting, and therefore we have a quorum. I will also ask the following staff persons to introduce themselves. Clerk to the board.
Good morning, Emily Kunze, Clerk to the Board.
Deputy Clerk.
Good morning, this is Christine Smith, Deputy Clerk.
County Manager.
Good morning, this is Dena Diorio, Mecklenburg County Manager.
And our County Attorney.
Good morning, Tyrone Wade, County Attorney.
Okay, at this time, would you join me for our Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Since we are again conducting a remote meeting this afternoon, there are a few housekeeping rules that we have to govern our actions so that the board minutes will accurately reflect our actions consistent with the law. If a commissioner wishes to leave the meeting, please ask for a point of personal privilege. State the privilege so that the minutes capture the action and attendance of each board member. When a commissioner returns, if they return, please announce your return when there's an opportunity to do so. Since there is no action item on the agenda this afternoon, the board will only receive updates on matters on the agenda. However, in order that the records and the minutes are correct, It is also necessary that I recognize each commissioner individually. Please wait, be recognized by the chair before speaking, and refrain from speaking over one another. We are meeting today to receive the county manager's recommended FY 2021 budget presentation. The board will not engage in dialogue regarding the county manager's recommended budget at this meeting. The board will have an opportunity for dialogue regarding the county manager's recommended budget at the board's May 12th budget public policy meeting beginning at 9 a.m. May 12th, 9 a.m. This meeting will also be held remotely. The board will begin budget deliberations on Tuesday, May 26, 2020 at 8 a.m. Tuesday, May 26 at 8 a.m. Prior to those deliberations, the board will hold a budget public hearing to receive comments on the county manager's recommended budget on Wednesday, May 13th at 6 p.m. That's Wednesday, May 13th at 6 p.m. That meeting will also be held remotely. Persons desiring to speak on the proposed budget can go to mecnc.gov/clerk, mecnc.gov/clerk to register to speak, or you may call 980-314-2914. That's 980-314-2914. Speaker registration is currently open, so you can start registering as soon as today. The deadline to register to speak, though, is Tuesday, May 12th at 5 p.m. You should be registered no later than the deadline, Tuesday, May 12th, 2020 at 5 p.m. The public may also submit written comments to the board by email to the clerk@mc.gov. Send your emails to clerk@mc.gov, or you may fax them at 704-336-5887. Again, you can fax your comments to the board at 704-336-5887, or you can use the U.S. mail service. Attention, clerk to the board, 600 East 4th Street, 11th floor, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28202. Clerk to the board, 600 East 4th Street, 11th floor, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28202. Comments in the mail must be received no later than Tuesday, May 12, 2020 by 5 p.m. Please note, all information provided in comments are subject to the North Carolina Public Records Law and will be released upon request. Now, if you need additional information, you can go to mecnc.gov/budget hearing. Additional information, mecnc.gov/budget hearing. Budget hearing. The board is scheduled to adopt the FY 2021 budget on Tuesday, June 2nd, during our regularly scheduled meeting. At this time, I will call on the County Manager, Dena Diorio, to present the FY 2021 budget.
Good morning, Chair Dunlap and members of the Board of County Commissioners. It is an honor and privilege to serve as your county manager and present my recommended budget for fiscal year 2021. My remarks will serve as an executive summary and highlight the most important investments and initiatives included in my recommended budget. Following my remarks, Michael Bryant, Management and Budget Director, will present a more complete overview. Before I begin listing my funding recommendations for fiscal year 2021, please allow me a moment to explain some of the factors that played a significant role in shaping my recommendations. Last year, an invisible enemy surfaced in Wuhan, China, becoming one of the biggest health threats in our country's history. The novel coronavirus known as COVID-19 has attacked the respiratory systems of hundreds of thousands of people around the world. Since its inception, the virus has swept and continues to sweep throughout the nation, traveling from state to state, harming individuals, families, societies, and healthcare systems. But the impact of this invisible enemy reaches far beyond the physical. The virus has not only ravaged the immune systems of people who have become infected, but it also has pillaged our way of life by forcing us to change the way we go about conducting basic daily tasks. On March 11, COVID-19 was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization. Then days later, the first presumptive positive case of COVID-19 was identified in Mecklenburg County. Since that time, Mecklenburg County has become one of many jurisdictions around the world to implement strategies to mitigate the virus's impact in hopes of saving lives and making resources in area hospitals readily available. Mecklenburg County was the first county in North Carolina to implement a stay-at-home proclamation, restricting non-essential activities to help slow the spread of the virus, and our efforts have worked. Soon after the stay-at-home proclamation went into effect in Mecklenburg County, we have flattened the curve. Today, there are 1,641 laboratory confirmed cases in Mecklenburg County and 50 deaths. We have 12 long-term care facilities in our county in outbreak status. But while the strategies to extinguish the virus, contagious flames in Mecklenburg County are working, the effects of the virus rages on impacting our local economy and economies of communities around the world. While the stay-at-home proclamation remains a critical component in managing the virus within our community, it has also led to a reduction in two major revenue streams that county so heavily relies on. That is sales tax and interest on investments. The revenues generated by local sales, interest on investments, and property taxes are vital to sustain the work we do in Mecklenburg County. It is through these streams of revenue, as well as other fees and charges, that enables the county to provide services to our community. The county is anticipating a sharp decline in the economy during the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2020 as a result of retail stores, restaurants, and other businesses closing as a result of the stay-at-home proclamation. The temporary closing of local businesses, the reduction in hotel occupancies, or the temporary halt of sitting down for a meal at a local restaurant and bar has had an impact on the dollars that would have circulated throughout the community. And the local economy will suffer even further due to the loss of employment so many county residents have sustained in the days since the pandemic began. Our national and local economists agree that this health crisis has evolved into a financial crisis. As a result, several governments across the country and state will be required to reduce or eliminate critical services. Fortunately, that is not the case for Mecklenburg County. The Great Recession of 2008 taught us valuable lessons. We were forced to make over $146.6 million in reductions to services. We eliminated 781 positions, which included 579 laid-off employees, and we put a halt to our capital projects. The actions we were forced to take during the Great Recession derailed the county's progress. It was not until this current fiscal year that per capita funding for parks and recreation was restored to pre-recession levels. We cannot repeat the funding decisions that set the progress of the county back. As CFO, I was tasked with leading the effort that would ensure that the county would be able to respond much better when the next recession occurred. And the time is now to apply our lessons learned. Mecklenburg County government is resilient, and because of the Board of County Commissioners' commitment to the fiscal discipline strategy, we are in a strong position to manage what lies ahead. The county's fund balance policy has a provision that allows for this one-time funding source to support recurring expenses during a financial crisis. Our strong reserves have given the county the foundation it needs to weather the impact of the revenue losses during this crisis, while allowing us to fund critical programs and services for our residents and avoid impacting our workforce. The county began fiscal year 2020 with $259 million in reserves, creating a strong fund balance and healthy debt profile. Of this amount, approximately $102 million is available to offset the anticipated revenue loss in fiscal year 2021 and beyond. The uncertainty of our current economy serves as a reminder of the importance of fiscal discipline. Our commitment to this strategy has allowed us the necessary funding to create a budget that will allow us to fulfill three main goals. The fiscal year 2021 recommended budget has three goals and achieves three goals. Number one, it funds the county's core critical services and programs that provide support to our residents who need it the most. It maintains a fund balance that will be available to mitigate the impact of the impending revenue shortfall as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And three, it funds services and initiatives that align with the Board of County Commissioners' top 5 priorities. My fiscal year 2021 recommended operating budget totals $1.9 billion, an increase of $5.6 million or 0.3% over fiscal year 2021. The recommended budget maintains the current tax rate at 61.69 cents. The first area I will cover is the revenue that supports the recommended budget. At the annual board retreat in January, our projected revenue growth for fiscal year 2021 was $46 million. However, given the economic impact of COVID-19, the revised revenue growth is expected to be $19 million. Sales tax is expected to be $7.5 million or 4% lower than the fiscal year 2020 budget. And interest on investments is expected to decline by $6.2 million or 52% lower in the upcoming year. The recommended budget includes a total of $52 million in fund balance. Of that amount, $33 million will address one-time expenses and $19 million will be appropriated to offset the anticipated revenue decline in fiscal year 2021. While determining the amount of fund balance to be used to offset the revenue shortfall, it is imperative to maintain fiscal discipline. Our fund balance policy stipulates that we replenish fund balance within 2 years if we fall below 28% of revenue. The amount of fund balance in my recommended budget results in having $50 million above the 28% threshold. It is important that we have sufficient fund balance available should it take longer for revenues to return to normal revenues. Also, we must be mindful that the $19 million in fund balance will eventually have to be replaced with recurring revenue to support those ongoing expenses. So in short, the $19 million we spend today will impact our growth revenue in future years. Also, the budget includes repurposing $14 million or 0.75 cents of the property tax rate from the debt service fund to the general fund. This revision will still allow sufficient funding to service our current debt and provide funding for future debt. Over the last 5 years, the county has invested $30 million annually to address deferred maintenance. The recommended budget provides $25 million for deferred maintenance, allowing $5 million to be invested in county services. These adjustments, in addition to the growth revenue, will provide $52 million in revenue for the general fund. If there was never a defining event that reiterates the importance of the county's public health department, it would be COVID-19. The pandemic has illustrated the department's primary goal in real time for our residents to witness, and that is to promote and protect the public's health. During this crisis, the county's public health department has served as the nucleus for our emergency response to the pandemic. The public health department quickly evolved into the department residents and the media turned to for guidance, information, data, and coordination of services and resources needed to meet the current demands of COVID-19 patients while preparing for new cases. I want to personally thank Gibby Harris for her hard work and leadership throughout the course of this pandemic. I would also like to thank the public health staff for their continued commitment and dedication to the community. But just as protecting the public health is a function of the department, public health also bears the responsibility of finding innovative ways to promote healthy habits within the community. It is through the creation and promotion of programs and services that allows our residents opportunities to improve their health and reduce their risk of developing chronic health conditions and possibly assist in closing the gap where health disparities exist. So to support the department's efforts, I'm recommending a total investment of $86.3 million for fiscal year 2021. The funding will give the department the support it needs to provide quality services to county residents. I'm recommending an additional $104,000 for the Children's Developmental Services Agency to maintain service levels following a 13% increase in enrollment. The agency provides early intervention and support for children from birth to age 3 who have developmental delays. I'm also recommending an additional $80,000 in funding for interpreter services to accommodate the needs of non-English speaking families. I'm also recommending $150,000 for advanced tuberculosis testing. The evidence-based screening method is considered a best practice for tuberculosis screening tests and will replace the tuberculin skin test. In addition, I'm recommending $43,000 for the tuberculosis clinic due to a decline in state funding and an increase in active TB cases and investigation. The funds will be used to purchase supplies and maintain service levels. I'm recommending $160,000 for the increased costs associated with LabCorp's annual contract. I'm also recommending $60,000 to increase PrEP funding. The additional investment will bring the total funding for the program to $250,000 for fiscal year 2021. And finally, for public health, the recommendation also includes $66,000 for one full-time school health nurse to stay within the policy of one public health nurse per school. While the pandemic is a worldwide crisis, there are many within our community who are faced with individual crises and struggles each day. The Department of Social Services continues to work to support these families and individuals in their time of need, and those needs may increase due to the pandemic. To sustain the level of services the department provides and respond to increases in demand, I am recommending $165.5 million be appropriated for fiscal year 2021. The recommended amount includes the following: $258,000 to meet increased funding for foster care placements, $86,000 to expand senior nutrition meal services to support increases to both homebound and congregate meal programs, and $206,000 to add 70 wards to private guardianship. I'm also recommending investing $350,000 to fund the county's portion of the Raise the Age funding grant match. This funding will provide therapeutic services to juveniles that have come in contact with the criminal justice system. As we continue our efforts to improve operational efficiencies in the department, my recommended budget includes an additional $886,000 for youth and family services employee retention strategies, as well as $250,000 for an efficiency analysis of the Economic Services Division. Finally, $151,000 will be appropriated to fund the first phase of the new Family Justice Center. The funding will cover operating expenses for the center to better serve victims of domestic violence. This budget continues our efforts to keep our employees and customers safe while doing business within the county. For fiscal year 2021, I'm recommending an additional $1.6 million for security staffing as part of our weapons screening initiative at major facilities, as well as $413,000 for enhanced security at park locations. The budget also includes $881,000 to fund increases in the county's facility maintenance contracts. The county's information technology team was an integral component of developing our virtual county government in response to COVID-19. I cannot thank Keith Gregg and his team enough for their efforts in deploying equipment, training employees to work at home, and to do so safely and securely. The previous investments we have made and the efficiencies we have implemented made this possible. My recommended budget for fiscal year 2021 continues these investments. The budget includes $1.7 million in additional funding for hardware and software upgrades and enhancements. And as we plan for today, we also must look ahead to the future. As part of the County Assessor's Office effort to prepare for the 2023 revaluation, I am recommending $1.1 million for technology security enhancements needed for the North Carolina property tax system and Assess Pro software, and $1.3 million to fund the Revaluation Reserve Fund. In fiscal year 2020, the board identified 5 priority areas to address critical needs in Mecklenburg County. In fiscal year 2020, the county invested $65.1 million to support early childhood education, mental health, parks and greenways, affordable housing, and reducing racial disparities. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded the world of the importance of addressing these issues, specifically when it comes to disparities within our communities. According to hospital data released by the Centers for Disease Control, in the first month of the U.S. pandemic, 1 in 3 patients who became sick enough to require hospitalization for the virus was African American. The COVID-19 pandemic has been exceptionally devastating because the number of lives that have been lost to the virus. But what has been equally devastating is what the data reveals about the disproportionality in the demographics of those impacted by the virus. Mecklenburg County is committed to doing its part in helping to reduce racial disparities within the community by providing support to programs and initiatives that help close gaps where they exist, whether it is education, economic opportunity, or in healthcare. I'm recommending new investments of $2.5 million for the board priority of reducing racial disparities to fund the following areas. $1.3 million in funding for the United Way's Unite Charlotte initiative. Unite Charlotte, which launched in 2016, provides grant funding for grassroots organizations and programs geared toward improving economic opportunity through initiatives that address racial equity, poverty, civil rights, and access and inclusion. The county's funding will support 25 Tier 1 grants of $25,000 each. In addition, Tier 1 grant recipients will participate in Duke University's Certificate in Nonprofit Management Training Program. The funding will also support 10 Tier 2 grants of $40,000, and Tier 2 grant recipients will participate in executive leadership training. The budget also includes $775,000 to address food insecurity in the county. The proposal includes $125,000 to support the initial phase of the Three Sisters Food Market Co-op located on West Boulevard, and $600,000 reserved for the development of additional initiatives to address the issue of food deserts within the community. The remaining $50,000 funds the Loaves and Fishes Agency to provide groceries to families experiencing short-term crises through a network of food pantries. I'm also recommending $77,000 for 1 full-time project compliance coordinator for the Minority Women Small Business Enterprise Program. The coordinator will be responsible for tracking data and analysis of construction projects to ensure equity and access for minority contractors. In addition to these investments, I'm recommending $150,000 to fund community service grants to the Young Black Leadership Alliance and $50,000 for Prospera, North Carolina. In order to effectively address the underlying issues around disparities in our society, you must look at education. Research shows that education is the gateway for future success, but not everyone has been afforded the opportunity. Since fiscal year 2019, Mecklenburg County has created a pathway through MEC Pre-K to allow 4-year-olds access to a quality pre-K education. More than 1,200 children have been enrolled in the program since it began, and we want to increase the number of children served in fiscal year 2021. I'm recommending a total investment of $21.3 million for MEC Pre-K. That is an increase of $5.5 million over fiscal year 2020. The investment will allow the county to add 20 new classrooms, allowing for an additional 365 students to be served during the upcoming school year. The increase will allow for a total enrollment capacity of 1,602 children. Just as it is important to provide opportunities to care for the physical and educational well-being of the community, we must also continue to provide programs and services to address the mental health needs in our community. The board priority of mental health supports allows the county to keep that goal in focus. For fiscal year 2021, I'm recommending new investments of $6.2 million for the following. $1.3 million for additional services in our detention centers to increase efficiencies and reduce wait times for those in need of service. Additional funding will provide an assistant nursing director, licensed practical nurse, a mental health clinician, a physician, a psychiatrist, a psychiatric registered nurse, and a recreational therapist. I'm also recommending $945,000 for Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools' exceptional children's staffing and special education support. This will fund 5 teachers, 5 teacher assistants, 4 itinerant pre-K teachers, and 2 occupational therapists. My budget also continues our commitment to expand supportive services to our schools. I've included $3.4 million to fund an additional 15 social workers, 15 counselors, 5 psychiatrists, and 2 behavioral health specialists. In fiscal year 2020, the county embarked on a journey to create more affordable housing options within the community. The county invested $15.2 million in various programs and initiatives to begin the process of helping students obtain and maintain housing they could afford. One of the programs the county invested in was Habitat for Humanity's Critical Home Repair Program. The program addresses major safety concerns in homes by making necessary repairs to keep homes in good condition. In fiscal year 2020, the county invested $1 million for critical home repair projects. To date, 39 projects have been completed, and the county anticipates another 31 homes in need of repair during fiscal year 2021. I am recommending an additional $1 million to help fund the program for a second year. In addition, the recommended budget includes an additional $3 million to expand our rental subsidy programs. The county's parks and greenways continue to be an essential component of the livelihood of our residents. The county's parks and greenways have been a tremendous resource during the pandemic, as many has relied on these areas as an outlet for exercise. For fiscal year 2021, I'm recommending $2.8 million to support 59 part-time and limited part-time positions to support operations at the new Eastway Regional Recreation Center, expected to open later this year. This funding will also provide for 2 15-passenger wheelchair accessible buses for the center and computers for the computer lab. I'm also recommending $37,000 for additional programming and related expenses at Stevens Nature Creek and the McDowell Nature Center. And I'm also recommending $100,000 to allow for 2 maintenance and operations positions at American Legion Memorial Stadium. In total, I'm allocating $4.8 million in operating costs and maintenance for new and existing park and recreation facilities. The current public health crisis has impacted almost every aspect of our lives, including the way we work. Mecklenburg County, like many other service agencies, is still responsible for providing the best possible service to our residents. I would like to thank our county employees for their support and hard work during this pandemic. Our workforce continued to provide all critical county services and made the transition to a virtual county government a seamless one. The talent and dedication that exists in our county is like none other. I am grateful and proud to be the leader of such a talented, dedicated, and passionate workforce. Just as the county is bracing for what lies ahead in the days following coronavirus, I'm sure so many of our employees. But there is one thing our employees can be sure of, and that is the county values their hard work and commitment and recognizes their effort. Last year, we kicked off a comprehensive review of our classification and compensation system. This review was initiated as we realized that our county employees lagged our competitors as our pay structure had not been adjusted in over a decade. This has presented significant challenges with recruitment and retention. In fiscal year 2020, the Board of County Commissioners approved the first step in helping to elevate employee salaries closer to the salaries of our competitors in the market by approving a 5.5% salary increase for all county employees. However, the estimated revenue loss due to COVID-19 will require us to delay the second step in right-sizing our salaries, which is the implementation of the results from the review of our classification and compensation system. Although we have to delay the implementation, it is imperative that we continue to recognize these employees are on the front lines, risking their own health on a daily basis as we combat COVID-19. So for fiscal year 2021, I'm recommending the following: $9.2 million for a 3% across the board increase for all of our employees, I'm also recommending $682,000 for a merit increase, 3% merit increase for all of our medic employees. My recommended budget also includes $4 million for required pension contributions and $1.3 million for increased costs associated with medical and dental insurance. In addition to the mental health services highlighted above, I'm recommending the following investments for the Sheriff's Office for fiscal year 2021. $683,000 for arrest processing and field operations and the Strategic Response Unit during the Republican National Convention. The funding will support staffing costs, program supplies, equipment maintenance and repairs, and metal detector rentals. $218,000 to replace a total of 345 bulletproof vests. The vests need to be replaced every 5 years. I'm also recommending $54,000 to purchase 3 patrol narcotic detention canines. Juvenile facilities are now required to provide more clothing and supplies for juvenile offenders due to the new requirement as a result of the Raise the Age legislation. I'm recommending $100,000 to provide the supplies needed for juvenile programs and housing. Now I'll review my funding recommendations for an area that continues to emerge as a top priority for our community, and that is Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. I'm recommending a total of $523.5 million for fiscal year 2021, which is an increase of 4% over fiscal year 2020. Of that amount, I'm recommending additional funding of $19.4 million to support CMS's operating expenses. The funding will cover the following: health insurance and retirement rate increases, funding to accommodate charter school enrollment growth for 1,807 students, maintenance and operating costs for 1 new school, support staffing and social and emotional learning support, and as I mentioned earlier, exceptional children staffing and special education support. I'm also recommending $5 million for building services, preventive maintenance staffing, and $1.3 million in one-time funding for CMS's enterprise resource planning systems. For Central Piedmont Community College, I'm recommending an increase of $1.2 million, which is a 3% increase over fiscal year 2020. The funding will cover costs for the following: salaries for maintenance staff, costs of maintenance and repairs of buildings and grounds, insurance fees for campus building, vehicles, and workers' compensation for institutional employees paid from local funds, and other necessary insurance coverages. Opportunities to learn and grow are often found in places outside of the classroom setting. One place learning occurs is in our public libraries. The county recognizes the role our partners play in furthering the educational development of our community. I'm recommending $350,000 in funding to support a request for proposal to develop a libraries facilities master plan. The purpose of the plan is to ensure access of library services throughout the entire county. Another area responsible for fostering growth and development within the community is arts and culture. I'm recommending a total of $900,000 in additional funding to support 3 grant programs for the Arts and Science Council. $200,000 for the ASC Cultural Vision Grant Program. The funding will provide up to $10,000 in grants for arts programs. $200,000 for ASC's Individual Artist Grant Program to support the development of up-and-coming artists. And finally, $500,000 for operating support grants that will be used to support emerging grassroots arts, science, and history organization with annual budgets under $1 million. My recommended budget also includes $1 million to support the capital campaign for the town of Cornelius's Kane Center for the Arts, which is currently under development. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all my staff who worked so hard on this recommended budget. This includes the members of my executive team, Management and Budget Director Michael Bryant and the Office of Management and Budget staff, Director of Strategic Planning and Evaluation Monica Allen and the Strategic Planning and Evaluation staff, Sarah Cunningham and the Department of Financial Services, Danny Deal and the Public Information staff, and my entire cabinet. I also want to thank the residents of Mecklenburg County and the Board of County Commissioners for your continued support. Now I will turn it over to Michael Bryant. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, County Manager Diorio, Chairman Dunlap, members of the Board of County Commissioners, and residents of Mecklenburg County, it is my pleasure to present to you the details of the manager's recommended budget. Before I begin my presentation, you should have an email in your inbox from the clerk that has an electronic copy of my presentation, the manager's remarks, and the recommended budget book. Hard copies of these materials will be sent to you following this meeting. Next slide. As the manager indicated in her remarks, the purpose of this presentation is to provide you a more complete overview of the fiscal year 2021 recommended budget. I will begin the presentation with an overview of the guiding principles, which are broad factors that shape the development of the recommended budget. A summary of revenue and expenses, recommended funding for nonprofits, investments in the public schools, community college, and literacy, and we'll end with next steps. Next slide. The manager factored these 8 guiding principles as she developed the recommended budget. Maintain our commitment to the fiscal discipline strategy that Mecklenburg County is known for. Minimize the anticipated fiscal impact that COVID-19 will have on Mecklenburg County's operating budget. Leverage our financial flexibility. Preserve fund balance so that it is available to offset the anticipated revenue shortfall for fiscal year 2020 and beyond. Avoid the unintended consequences of funding decisions from the Great Recession that derailed the county's progress. Apply lessons learned from the Great Recession, make strategic funding decisions, and continue to invest in the board priorities based on available funding, and maintain our AAA bond rating. Next slide. Now I'll provide you a summary of the revenue estimates for fiscal year 2021. Next slide. The property tax base is projected to increase by 3.3%. That is a $6 billion increase in fiscal year 21. Put that in perspective. The percent change was 42% in fiscal year 20, which was a revaluation year. The fiscal year 21% change of 3% is more aligned to fiscal year 19, which was 2.6% over the fiscal year 2018 budget and 3.5% in fiscal year 2018 over the fiscal year 2017 budget. County manager is recommending no change to the property tax rate, which is 61.69 cents. The value of a penny will increase slightly from 18.2 million to 18.8 million. That is an increase of 3% or $554,000. Next slide. This chart provides a comparison of the actual revenue received for the general fund sales tax revenue over the last 5 years. The adopted budget amount for fiscal year 2020, the pre-COVID estimate in fiscal year 2021 in the gray bar, and the revised estimate for fiscal year 2021 in the green bar on the end. Fiscal year 2021 revised estimate factors the impact that COVID-19 will have on the current fiscal year and fiscal year 2021. The original fiscal year 21 general fund sales tax estimate was $223.6 million and has been revised to $200.5 million, which is $7.5 million or 3.6% less than the fiscal year 2020 adopted budget. To put that in perspective, we estimated a 5.8% increase in fiscal year 2020 over the fiscal year 2019 budget. Next slide. Now that you have an overview of the property and sales tax projections, this next section provides you a deeper look into how the manager leveraged her flexibility in developing her recommended budget while remaining committed to the fiscal discipline strategy. Next slide. Here is a summary of the revenue estimates after factoring the impact from COVID-19. You can see the reduction to the sales tax, investment income, and other categories totaling a loss of $15.6 million. So after netting this loss against the growth revenue and property tax, charges for services, and overhead charges for Louisa, the manager had initially $19 million to prepare her budget. This is before making any adjustments. Next slide. With a moderate $19 million in growth available to invest in next fiscal year, county manager began to explore opportunities to increase the revenue available to build her budget. First, she factored appropriating fund balance to offset the anticipated loss in revenue next fiscal year. There is a provision in our fund balance policy that permits the manager to use fund balance to support reoccurring expenses. Here's a summary of that policy. The minimum of total general fund balance and debt service fund combined to the general fund actual revenues will be 28%. If the general fund balance falls below the minimum 28% of total general fund revenues, the funds must be replenished over the next 2 fiscal years. The unassigned fund balance will be maintained at a level sufficient to provide the resources to meet operating cost needs and to allow for unforeseen needs of an emergency nature to permit orderly adjustments to changes resulting from termination or significant reductions in revenue sources. And as noted here, every fund balance dollar spent on a reoccurring expense will eventually need to be replaced with ongoing revenue. Otherwise, the budget will have a structural deficit, which will be frowned upon by our rating agencies. Next slide. Here are the 3 categories that make up the general fund balance. Restricted, required by the state statute. Committed, amounts approved by the board to be used for a specific purpose. And unassigned, which is portions that has not been restricted, committed, or assigned for a specific purpose. Next slide. This chart shows a breakdown of the county's fund balance, including the debt service fund estimated for year-end June 30th, 2020. The bar on the left-hand side provides the overall total of fund balance in the amount of $705 million, which $468 million is the general fund and $237 million is for the debt service fund. The bar on the right-hand side provides a breakout of the fund balance. Starting from the bottom, in the gray shades, you can see how the debt service fund is broken out by what is restricted, which is $29 million, versus $208 million that is committed. The navy blue box in the amount of $134 million is what is restricted in the general fund. Open contracts where work has started but not completed are examples of items in this category. The lighter shaded blue box in the amount of $58 million is committed fund balance. Examples of this includes the one-time fund balance appropriated in the fiscal year 2020 adopted budget. The dark green box in the amount of $224 million is unassigned. It is the amount available for expenses and or to offset a decrease in revenue. The light green box at the top in the amount of $52 million represents what the manager is including in her recommended budget. $33 million of that amount for one-time expenses and $19 million is to offset the anticipated loss in revenue. There is a balance of $50 million available in unassigned general fund prior to falling below the 28% threshold that will require a payback over a 2-year period. Next slide. Next, the manager leveraged flexibility in the debt service fund by adjusting the amount of property tax set aside to pay for debt. Based on a thorough analysis, this adjustment will not have a negative impact on future debt. The manager is recommending decreasing the amount of property tax that is transferred from the general fund to the debt service fund by 3/4 of a penny, which provides an additional $14 million being available to invest in county services. Prior to the manager making this adjustment to the debt service fund, we projected an increase in county revenue of the debt service fund in the amount of $7.9 million based on the fiscal year 21 value of a penny. However, after the manager's adjustment to the amount transferred, we have a net reduction of $6.1 million. In the expense section of the table, after factoring this adjustment, the manager is still recommending setting aside $60.5 million for future debt service and $25 million for the deferred maintenance plan. Next slide. Each year, the manager and her cabinet set forth a diligent effort to identify savings that could be repurposed to offset the need for additional funds. Since fiscal year 2015, the manager has identified $73.3 million in savings to support expenses that would require additional funding. And it becomes more challenging to identify additional funds each year. With respect to the challenge, the manager continues to search for savings and funds that can be repurposed. This roll up your sleeves, deep dive analysis approach has identified $21.8 million that is repurposed in the fiscal year 21 recommended budget, which consists $14 million from the debt service fund, $5 million from deferred maintenance, and $2.8 million from county departments. The department savings will have no negative impact on services. Since being appointed county manager, Dena Diorio has identified over $95 million in savings and funds repurposed to support expenses that would require additional funding. These savings is the equivalent of 5 cents of the fiscal year 21 value of a penny. That demonstrates the manager's commitment to the maintain fiscal discipline strategy. Next slide. So after the manager leveraged all flexibility while maintaining fiscal discipline, the amount of revenue available increased from $19 million to $52 million after transferring 0.75 cents from the debt service fund and $19 million in fund balance. Next slide. This is a comparison slide of the total revenue appropriated in the county's $1.9 billion budget. I've covered the top half of the table labeled General Fund County Dollar on the previous slides, which notes an increase of $52.3 million. The lower part of the table lists the non-county revenues, which are revenues that are for specific purposes. The reductions to the debt service fund, sales tax that fund debt service, transit, and interest on investments total $12.2 million in lost revenue in comparison to a net increase of $8.1 million in fiscal year 20. There is a slight increase in other non-county tax revenue, which is primarily federal inmate revenue, law enforcement, and fire protection service district. In the second green row, the manager is decreasing the amount of fund balance to support one-time expenses by 60% from the fiscal year 2020 adopted amount to preserve fund balance in light of COVID-19. This is in contrast to the 158% increase in fiscal year 20 over fiscal year 2019. So these estimates result in the total general fund county revenue increasing by $52.3 million or 4.6%, primarily due to property tax and fund balance, and a net total revenue increase of $5.6 million or less than 1% in the total recommended budget for fiscal year 2021 because of reductions in fund balance for one-time expenses and reductions to the debt service fund. Next slide. The general fund budget can be viewed in 3 broad categories. This slide provides a breakdown of how the general fund county dollar growth revenue is allocated across the 3 broad categories in the recommended budget. As you can see, the county and education categories almost split the growth revenue in equal shares by dollar amount, and both categories increased by nearly 5%. Next slide. This next section provides a summary of the expenses in the recommended budget. Next slide. Here's a summary of the appropriation of fund balance. A total of $33 million supports one-time expenses. Of this amount, $17.3 million will fund technology, fleet, and capital maintenance. The remaining $15.7 million will support one-time expenses, such as $6.3 million for CMS facility maintenance and the second phase of their ERP. A $4 million investment in affordable housing, of which $3 million is for rental subsidies and $1 million for critical home repair. $2.4 million for preparation for the 2023 revaluation. $1 million for the campaign for the Town of Cornelius Kane Center for the Arts. $600,000 in restricted contingency for the planning of food desert initiative. $350,000 for a public library master plan to eliminate library deserts. $272,000 will replace bulletproof vests and purchase 3 K9s for the sheriff's office. $250,000 for cybersecurity investments and IT consulting for the RNC. $150,000 to convert paper files to electronic documents in the public defender's office, and $122,000 for finance for training and temp positions. With the addition of the $19 million added from fund balance as revenue, the total fund balance appropriation is $52 million, which is $30 million less than what was adopted in fiscal year 2020, and reflects the manager's commitment to preserve fund balance to ensure it is available if it takes longer than we currently anticipate for the economy to recover. Next slide. This slide lists in ranked order your budget priorities. The next couple of slides will highlight the investments the manager is recommending in these areas. We will go in more detail on May 12th. In the meantime, on page 116 in the recommended budget document, there are details of all of these investments. Next slide. This slide provides a summary of all new investments and total funds that supports the board's budget priorities. The manager is recommending $23.3 million new funding to support these 5 important items. The additional investment plus existing funds bring the total investment in the recommended budget to support the board's priorities to $164.8 million. Next slide. The slide lists the major investments for 3 of the 5 budget priorities, beginning with the reduced racial disparities priority. The manager's investment is $2.5 million, which includes $1.3 million to fund the United Ways Unite Charlotte initiative, which will provide 35 grants to grassroots organizations, $775,000 to invest in eliminating food deserts throughout this community, $200,000 to invest in 2 new community service grants that provide services that focus on eliminating disparities in our community. The investment in Make Pre-K is $5.5 million and will fund 20 new classrooms, increasing the total to 80 and serving over 1,600 students. And the investment in affordable housing is $4 million, which $3 million is for additional funding for rental subsidy, and $1 million will support critical home repairs. Next slide. The manager is recommending $6.2 million in new investments for the mental health support budget priority. It includes $3.4 million for student supportive services, such as social workers and guidance counselors, $1.3 million for mental health services in our detention centers, $945,000 for staffing to support CMS students with special needs, $350,000 for therapeutic services to juveniles that have come in contact with the criminal justice system. And the manager is recommending $5.2 million in new funding for parks and greenways, which includes $2.1 million for new staffing to support the opening of the new Eastway Regional Center, $2.2 for operating funds to support the new center, $703,000 in operating funds for greenways, nature centers, nature preserves, and summer camps, $160,000 for enhanced security at the parks, and $100,000 to add 2 full-time positions in operating funds for Memorial Stadium. Next slide. Although the board's priorities are extremely important, the manager had to consider other competing needs while developing the recommended budget. These factors include department strategic business plans, public education and community college, technology and internal support departments, environmental services, health and human services, public safety, employee compensation, and community priorities. Next slide. As the manager noted in her remarks, our county employees are providing critical services during this pandemic. Many of them are on the front lines, ultimately putting themselves and their families at risk. County values their commitment and dedication to the residents of this community. The recommended budget includes an increase of $16.3 million in total compensation next fiscal year. This includes $9 million for a 3% increase in pay for all employees to help bring salaries closer to the compensation offered by our competitors in the market and to improve recruitment and retention. Recommended budget includes $4 million to fund an increase in payments to the retirement pension plan, and $1.3 million in medical and dental insurance increases. Also, $708,000 to cover the annualized cost for new positions approved in fiscal year 20. $440,000 is included to fund the state-required law enforcement separation allowance, and the recommended budget includes funding to support a 3% pay increase for medic employees to assist with offering more competitive salaries. Next slide. Here's a list of some of the new investments in the recommended budget that are in addition to the board's budget priorities. It includes over $2 million for enhanced security at parks, libraries, and government facilities, $1.7 million for funding for hardware and software upgrades and cybersecurity, $1.1 million in utility costs, $950,000 in funding for maintenance increases and newer expanded space, $900,000 in funding for the Arts and Science Council to support 3 of their grant programs, $800,000 in contract increases for facility maintenance, laundry, and food services for the Sheriff's Office. Medic will receive $560,000 in funding for ambulance replacement, a $350,000 grant match to expand residential services at the Thompson Child and Family Focus Center, $258,000 in funding to increase foster care placement, $250,000 to fund an efficiency analysis of the Economic Services Division, $240,000 to invest in supporting the 2023 revaluation, $150,000 to fund the first phase of the Family Justice Center, $125,000 to increase funding for the PrEP program and to add 1 new school health nurse, $119,000 in county funds, 1 family court victim services coordinator, and 1 case manager to assist those with a criminal history, access benefits, and to pay for bus passes for reentry services clients. $86,000 in funding to provide an additional 7,500 meals for homebound and congregate meal programs. Next slide. Here's a summary of the position count over the last 10 years. The gray shaded area represents the full-time position. The manager's recommended budget will add 9 full-time, 15 part-time, and 50 limited part-time positions. To put that in perspective, the fiscal year 2020 adopted budget included 132 new full-time positions in comparison to the 9 new full-time positions recommended next fiscal year. Next slide. The next section that I will cover is the manager's recommendation for community service grants. The funding supports partnerships between the county and nonprofit agencies that serve county residents to deliver services aligned to the county's department strategies. The manager's recommended budget provides funding for 16 programs, 5 which is recommended for funding for the first time. Next slide. Here's a summary of the community service grant process. This information, along with other relevant details about the process, was shared with applicants back at the October 24th orientation. This process includes a sunset provision, which is applicable to any nonprofit that has received funding for 3 consecutive fiscal years. Wings for Kids, Lake Norman Community Health Clinic, and the Veterans Bridge Home are the 3 nonprofits subject to the sunset provision next fiscal year. And the manager is recommending that the Lake Norman Community Health Clinic and Veterans Bridge Home become vendors with the county. It is recommended that Wings for Kids be sunset. Next slide. Listed in alphabetical order are the nonprofit agencies that the manager is recommending funding with a grant from the county's competitive process. Second column provides a brief description of each program, and the third column provides the recommended funding amount. The asterisk denotes the 5 agencies recommended for funding for the first time. 5 new agencies are Loaves and Fishes, which will provide groceries to individuals and families that are experiencing a short-term crisis through a network of food pantries. The Mental Health America of Central Carolinas will offer one-on-one and group support for families with youth experiencing emotional, behavior, and mental health challenges, as well as suicide prevention. Prospera, North Carolina will provide bilingual assistance to Hispanic entrepreneurs trying to establish or expand their business by offering business seminars, consulting services, and access to capital. The Time Out Youth Center will offer support, advocacy, counseling, and as a physical center, a drop-in space to resource a computer lab, showers, laundry, and a kitchen for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning youth ages 11 through 20 who are experiencing homelessness or difficulty finding housing that is safe and affirming. The Young Black Leadership Alliance is a mentoring program that will provide African American students the opportunity to attend leadership training sessions, college prep education, and community service projects at Johnson C. Smith University and UNCC Charlotte. Next slide. Now I will share with you the details of the manager's recommendation for funding education and literacy in fiscal year 2021. Next slide. This slide provides a summary of the manager's funding recommendation for CPCC. Community colleges will receive an additional $1.2 million to support their operating expenses next fiscal year. Also, CPCC will receive a total of $3 million for deferred maintenance, which is $1 million less than fiscal year 2020 as a result of the adjustments due to COVID-19. Next slide. The Board of Education requested a total of $37 million for next fiscal year. The next 2 slides provide an overview of how the manager developed a recommended funding for CMS. This first slide provides a list of items that are recommended for funding. The manager is recommending fully funding the $8.9 million charter schools request and $5 million of the $5.1 million request for maintenance. Also, the manager is recommending to fully fund the local impact of retirement and continues the funding commitment to supportive services by fully funding the $3.4 million request to add 15 social workers, 15 guidance counselors, 5 psychologists, and 2 behavior specialists. In addition, the manager is providing $945,000 to fund 5 teachers, 5 teacher assistants, 4 pre-K teachers, and 2 occupational therapists for special needs students. The manager is recommending funding $547,000 of the maintenance request, and the balance of the recommended $25.6 million increase to CMS includes fully funding phase 2 of their ERP system and $1.1 million for the local impact for health insurance. Next slide. This slide lists the items that are not recommended for funding. These unfunded requests are primarily tied to salary increases and student growth. With regards to salary increases, as listed as a footnote on this slide, In fiscal year 2020, the board approved the manager's recommendation to provide $7.4 million to fund the local share of a pay increase for school administrators, non-certified staff, and certified staff. This increase was not included in the state budget. Therefore, as a result of the $7.4 million being included in the county's budget provided to CMS in fiscal year 2020 for the local share of the salaries that was not included in the state budget, the recommended budget does not include funding for salary increases in fiscal year 2021. Of the $36.9 million requested by CMS, the manager is recommending a total of $25.7 million in increased funding. Next slide. Also, CMS will receive $15 million in annual deferred maintenance funding, a reduction of $3 million due to the impact of COVID-19, and $4.9 million for capital replacement. And as noted on the previous slide, CMS will receive $5 million for facility maintenance and $1.3 to fund their ERP request, which bring the total appropriation to $25 million. The net $10 million increase on this slide accounts for the reduction of items such as security and deferred maintenance due to COVID-19. Unlike fiscal year 2020, the manager did not receive a request for one-time funding for security next fiscal year. Next slide. This chart is very telling as it summarizes the county's investment in education and literacy. It's categorized by funding for CMS, funding for CPCC, funding for the public library, the county's investment in maintaining one school health nurse per school. Also, it includes the investments in MEC Pre-K, child care subsidy, funding for the Arts and Science Council, nonprofits that provide educational related services, and Read Charlotte. County's fiscal year 21 investment in education and literacy, which includes operating and debt service, is $786.4 million. That is a $47.1 million increase, or 6.4% increase above fiscal year 20. This equates 55% of the $1.4 billion county funded portion of the recommended budget funding education and literacy. Next slide. So here are the headlines for the county manager's fiscal year 21 recommended budget. This slide is a recap of the major funding decisions. No repeat of any funding decisions from the Great Recession that derailed the county's progress. No reduction or elimination of services provided to county residents. No elimination of vacant or filled positions. No delay or freeze on any planned capital projects, including those for CMS. No increase in the property tax rate. It includes a total of $52 million in fund balance, including $19 million to offset the anticipated revenue shortfall. $50 million in fund balance is still available if the revenue shortfall is greater than we project. $21.8 million in efficiency savings and repurposed funds to support major investments have been identified by the manager. Funding recommendations that maintain fiscal discipline and will not threaten the county's AAA bond rating. Investments in the board's budget priorities, areas of interest, and the results from the Community Budget Public Engagement Initiative. And again, 55% of the county budget funds education and literacy. Chairman Dunlap, the Great Recession taught us that being sustainable is not enough to ensure the financial health of our organization. And if you don't learn from your history, you are doomed to repeat it. We must be resilient, able to thrive under conditions of adversity. Dena Diorio had the foresight and heard the footsteps of our next crisis. She put in place policies, procedures, and a maintained fiscal discipline strategy that will allow our great organization to withstand the shocks and stresses of COVID-19. And as a result, The manager's fiscal year 2021 recommended budget reflects Mecklenburg County's resiliency. Next slide. Here are the next key dates leading up to the adoption of the budget. Beginning on May 12th, the board will receive a detailed overview of the manager's recommended budget. On the 13th, we will have our public hearing at 6 p.m. As noted, the first two events will be virtual meetings. On the 26th and 27th, the location will be determined. On these two dates, you will have your straw vote workshop. And on June 2nd at 6 p.m., you're set to approve the fiscal year 2021 budget adoption. Next slide. The board's support staff will contact each commissioner to assess your interest, to meet, to discuss the recommended budget. Topics to discuss will include preparation for the workshop, the details of the manager's recommended budget, and an overview of the straw vote spreadsheet and process. Next slide. For additional information, visit the county's website, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. As noted by our chair at the beginning of the meeting, to register to speak at the hearing, visit this website or dial that number. And for more information about the public hearing, visit the website listed in the fourth bullet. Next slide. Chairman Dunlap, before I end my presentation, I'd like to thank the many men and women that have assisted me with the development of the manager's recommended budget. I appreciate everyone's flexibility. As a result of COVID-19, they are all listed on this slide. I especially like to thank our county manager for her leadership and ongoing support, and the employees in OMB. Because of COVID-19, we had to put this budget together by telework. All of our meetings were held in a virtual setting, and I can assure you that it is not easy to work virtually when you are putting together a $2 billion budget during a pandemic and an anticipated economic crisis. However, the OMB team did not skip a beat. I would like to publicly express my appreciation for their positive attitudes, commitment, and dedication to what is required of them to get the job done. It has been an honor and privilege to serve as your director, and I look forward to the many great things that each of you will achieve in the future. Next slide. Chairman Dunlap, this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for your presentation. As always, you do a stellar job. I know that the person who will follow you in this position will have very big shoes to fill. Thank you to our staff and all who were instrumental in this budget for us. And thank you to our county manager for her leadership of our staff that do such an outstanding job. We will have plenty of conversation about this budget as we go forward. We will do our dead level best to make sure that the public is made aware and keeps abreast of what we discuss as it relates to our budget. So again, thank you all. This concludes today's meeting. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman. This is Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell.
All right. Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner Susan Harden.
All right. The motion has been moved by Commissioner Susan Rodriguez McDowell, seconded by Commissioner Susan Harding. I will now conduct the roll call vote. Commissioner Hotham.
Aye, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Fuller. Commissioner Fuller.
Okay, here I am. Aye.
Commissioner Harden.
Aye.
Commissioner Jarrell.
Yes.
Commissioner Leak.
Yes.
Commissioner Powell.
Aye.
Commissioner Susan Rodriguez McDowell.
Aye.
Commissioner Scarborough.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. The clerk will read the results of the vote.
That was a unanimous yes vote to adjourn.
Thank you. The special meeting now stands adjourned.